What's up, guys? My name is Mike, and Mikey's
a fucking idiot.
So by now, most of you have probably already seen my video in which I discuss my opinion on emulators, in which I state that I believe that they are a better alternative for retro gaming than using the original consoles. Well, my good buddy Steven here at Korey Gaming decided to make a video refuting my points about my stance on emulators. His stance is that using the original hardware is the superior way to play old school games. So now, I'm going to make a rebuttal of his rebuttal. Let's do this shit! The first thing that Steven talks about is my stance on higher resolutions through emulation. He says it's not only a bad reason to support my stance, but it's also the worst possible reason to support my stance.
This has to be the dumbest, which is probably why it's the first one, argument that anyone could ever make about emulation gaming.
If you were to take an original NES game, a game like Super Mario Bros. 3, put it in your original NES that's hooked up to an RCA input TV, and play the game, it's gonna look something like this. This is to be expected because of the picture quality of these older TVs. The problem is a lot of people kept their original consoles after all of these years, and now they have giant-ass HD TVs. And now a lot of these games that were meant to be played on TVs from the 1980s and 1990s, these TVs just don't show the game to the best of their ability. And even modern TVs don't have the ability to up-res the games because that's not what they're built to do. I mean, here's Super Mario Bros. Recorded off an original NES. This is the actual hardware showing you this footage. Now, here's the exact same game being played on an emulator. I don't even need to say anything. Just look at it. It speaks for itself. The next thing that Steven talks about is how I said that using emulators allows you to play the games that you want to play with no bullshit in between. It's just you and the game. No fucking around with going to different stores, trying to find the games that you want. No taking a risk by buying them off eBay or Amazon. And he makes an extremely good point to counter this. He holds up his copy of Mike Tyson's Punch-Out, which is an extremely highly acclaimed game, and asks how many people can say that they own this. Oh, by the way, 2 million. 2 million! After this, Steven mentions that emulators can cause damage to your computer, which is absolutely true. I'm not gonna sit here and say that they can't. They can cause damage if you're not careful and you don't know what you're doing. He then goes on to show the blue screen of death, implying that emulators can flat out just crash your hardware. I'm sorry, Steven, do you remember experiencing shit like this? Old games have their own blue screen of death. It's just not a blue screen. It's just whatever the was on the screen. The next thing that Steven mentions is how downloading ROMs isn't fun, and it's so much more satisfying to hold the physical game in your hands. And there's a lot that can be said for that, but there's also a lot that can be said on the contrary. I mean, what if I don't have the space for it? What if I want to own a large collection of games, and I just don't have anywhere to put it? What if the games that I am collecting don't fit on my shelf? What if I'm collecting Neo Geo games, and Neo Geo games are f***ing enormous? I'm sorry, but it would be nice to own those games, but I don't want to have to own another 3 acres of land just so I can store my Neo Geo collection. This next one, I don't even know how the hell he came up with a rebuttal to this. I said that they're free. And he mentions that a gaming computer and a monitor would cost so much more than just having the collection that it would not be financially ethical. I'm sorry, who the f*** buys a gaming computer just to play emulators? If you already have a computer, not even a gaming computer, just an entry-level computer, you could probably play most of the emulators. Not all of them, which brings me to the next point that he makes. Right after this, I brought up one of my favorite arguments to support my claim. You can use any controller you want for any console, regardless. Steven mentions how an NES controller is simple, a D-pad and 2 buttons. And he also mentions how using an N64 controller actually takes skill to use. I will say, it does take skill to use that. What the f*** is that thing anyway? One thing that I really want to point out is that Steven completely forgot to mention the biggest workaround for the whole issue. He said that using an original controller for the console is the best possible way to play it. You're using the actual controller that was built for that console. And he shows his NES Dogbone controller, which is a great controller in its own right. But Steven, I want to show you something. This is a USB NES controller. This is a USB SNES controller. This is a USB Nintendo 64 controller. And not only that, they're new! They're not covered in scratch marks and, fucking maple syrup, which for some reason seems to get under all the buttons. My next point is that playing rare games is easy on an emulator, and Steven mentions eBay and Amazon. They're places you can go to find the rare games. Okay, fine. Fine, let's go to Amazon to find a rare game that I want to play. I want to play The Legend of Zelda Collector's Edition for the Nintendo GameCube. Let's see how much it costs. Are you fucking kidding me?! I understand that there are people who are diehard fans of certain series and they'll shell out as much money as they have to be able to play every game in the franchise that they love, but for a lot of us who just want to experience the game and see what it was like, unless you're shitting gold and wiping your ass with 50s, I'm sorry, it's just difficult for some people to get their hands on games like this! Next, I talk about how emulators exist on mobile devices, and Steven mentions how we don't need more zombies staring into their phones everywhere they go. And I completely agree. I hate the fact that this world is overrun by technology. But when I mention emulators on mobile devices, I'm not talking about the fucking SNES! I'm talking about the Game Boy! The Game Boy Color! The Game Boy Advance! Mobile platforms! Why the hell would I want to play a game like Mega Man X on my little ass smartphone screen when I could play it on my television? Emulating a mobile platform on a mobile device to me sounds extremely logical because it was mobile to begin with. I can understand emulating a home console on a mobile device is kinda stupid, especially considering that you don't have any external controller to use, but when you're emulating a mobile device, the kind of console where the controls were built into the unit itself, which smartphones make up for by just having touch controls built in and having the screen separate, I don't know, it just seems like a really good idea to me. I like the idea of being able to play Pokemon Gold on my phone wherever I go and not need to lug around a Game Boy Color, especially considering I don't have one and they're too big for my pockets. Whew, okay, I'm done. That was my rebuttal to Steven's rebuttal. I really hope you guys enjoyed this video because it was a hell of a lot of fun to make. Steven, I know you're watching this, you know we have fun, you know we're cool. Oh, by the way, this is for insulting Godzilla earlier. Anyway guys, I hope you enjoyed that video. Make sure to subscribe to Coed Gaming because we post gaming videos every single day and we got some really talented people on this channel. Thanks again for watching, and until next time, thanks phone. Peace. Oh, by the way, Steven, why the fuck are some of the images on your sweatshirt colored and some of them aren't?